Hello and welcome to the news at 5 from Channels Television's global headquarters in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Dominic Iwiwa, and these are the stories and reports we're tracking at the moment. We start off with legal matters, as some of the alleged coup plotters have been arraigned before Justice Joyce Abdul-Malik of the Federal High Court, Abuja. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Lateef Fagbemi, is leading the prosecution of the federal government, had filed a 13-count charge against the defendants. All the defendants are present in court, aside the former Minister of Petroleum, Timi Sylvia, who is said to be at large. The arraignment was stood down by the judge to enable the court to get an interpreter for the sixth defendant, Sheikh Abdul Kadir Sani, who only understands Hausa and Arabic. The court resumed seating according to his counsel. The defendants have pleaded not guilty to the 13-count charge. The AGF asks that they be remanded in custody of the DSS and for expeditious trial. Counsel for the first defendants is asking for a caveat to enable them have access to the defendants in the custody of the DSS. The AGF assures them that the right to access the defendants will not be denied. He says he is delighted that they are all on one page pertaining to accelerated trial. Justice Joyce Abdul-Malik has ordered accelerated trial and placed in custody and has placed the culprits in custody of the DSS. The case has been adjourned to 27th April for trial and accelerated hearing. Staying with legal matters, the Supreme Court has reserved judgments in the appeal by the national chairman of the African Democratic Congress, David Mark, challenging the jurisdiction of the court to intervene in the internal affairs of the ADC. A five-member panel of the Apex Court, led by Justice Garba Mohammed, disclosed this shortly after lawyers representing parties adopted their briefs of argument for and against the appeal. Counsel to Mr. David Mark, Jibrin Okutekpa San, in urging the court to allow the appeal, submitted that the Apex Court had on March 21, 2025, put an end to the issue before the court when it held that no court has jurisdiction to entertain cases bordering on internal affairs of political parties. Mr. Okutekpa urged the Apex Court to allow the appeal and hold that the trial court lacked the jurisdiction to entertain a suit bordering on the ADC's internal matters. Counsel to Nafiu Gombe, Robert Emu San, however, urged the Apex Court to reject the appeal and affirm the judgment of the lower court, which held that the case of the appellate was premature and dismissed it. After taking arguments from the parties, Justice Garba announced that judgment is reserved to a date that would be communicated to parties. With legal matters, the Supreme Court has reserved judgment in the appeal filed by the Turaki Group of the People's Democratic Party, seeking to upturn the Court of Appeal judgment which nullified the National Convention in Ibadan last year. A five-member panel of the Apex Court announced today that its judgment would be delivered on a date to be communicated to all parties in the appeal. Justice Garba Mohammed, who led the panel, made the announcement shortly after lawyers adopted their processes. While adopting their brief of the arguments filed on April 2nd, the appellants, through their team of lawyers led by Paul Orokoro San, urged the Supreme Court not only to allow their appeal but also to dismiss a cross-appeal lodged against them by a faction of the party aligned with the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. Justice Peter Lifu of the Federal High Court in Abuja had last year, in a judgment, restrained the Ambassador Ileya Damagum National Executive Committee of the PDP from proceeding with the convention in Ibadan, Oyo State. However, the party went ahead to conduct the convention in disregard to the orders of the court, as it predicated its action on the grounds that the Court of Justice Lifu lacked the jurisdiction to stop the convention. Now, the Plateau State government has filed charges against 5 suspects arrested by the Department of State Services in connection with the March 2026 killings of several persons in Angwa-Rukuba, Jos North Local Government area of the state. The government filed charges of criminal conspiracy to commit terrorism and other related offences against the suspects identified as Isa Umar Ibrahim, Awalu Abubakar and Musa Abubakar Ibrahim. The fifth defendant, Adamu Alasan, is charged with criminal conspiracy, culpable homicide, illegal possession of firearms, and illegally dealing in arms and ammunition. They were arrested between April 3rd and April 10th, 2026. The suspects are also allegedly connected to an attack that took place a year ago in Bokos and Bassa local government areas and their environs, where no fewer than 30 persons, including children, were killed. Now to the legislative arm of government. The Senate has directed the Chief of Defense Staff and Service Chiefs to carry out a comprehensive operational and logistic audit following recent attacks on military formations in Benishik and Mungunulu, Borno State. The resolution passed during plenary today mandates an in-depth review of the circumstances surrounding the assaults, including an assessment of equipment adequacy and adherence to rules of engagement. Lawmakers also called on the armed forces to address any gaps identified in the course of the audit. The Senate further urged the military to investigate allegations of civilian harm during operations with a view of ensuring accountability and preventing future occurrences. The lawmaker expressed deep concern over recent incidents that resulted in the deaths of several personnel, including senior military officers. In the same vein, lawmakers have also asked on the nation's security leadership to intensify coordinated operations to apprehend those responsible for a fresh wave of killings in Benue State. The upper chamber wants the federal government to immediately deploy additional military and paramilitary personnel to Akpa local government area and other affected parts of the state to restore law and order. According to the lawmakers, the incident in Akpa reflects a disturbing pattern of recurrent violence across rural communities in Benue State, resulting in loss of lives, displacement of residents, and destruction of property. President Bola Tinubu has formally written to the Senate seeking confirmation of several key appointments, including a new ministerial nominee as well as top financial and regulatory officials. In a letter read during plenary, the President requested the confirmation of Mr. Mukhtar Rabe Dharma as a ministerial nominee. The Senate referred the request to the Committee of the Whole for consideration with a directive to report back as soon as practicable. In a separate correspondence, President Tinubu also sought the State Senate's approval for the appointment of Abubakar Yuguda as Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The nomination was subsequently referred to the Senate's Committee on Banking, Insurance and Other Financial Institutions, which is expected to report back within 1 week. Additionally, the President requested confirmation for the reappointment of Barrister Benedict Umelno as a member of the Code of Conduct Bureau, representing the Southeast for a second term in office. This request was referred to the Senate's Committee on Anti-Corruption, also with a 1-week deadline to present its report. Today, millions across the globe are marking the 56th anniversary of Earth Day with the theme, Our Power, Our Planet. But the mood this year is different. It's less about awareness and more about action. This year's celebration is coming after the warning that March 2026 is tied as the world's second warmest March behind 2025. Experts note that the intense heat was made more likely and more severe due to climate change. Our correspondent Ayola Kasim has more.
From the melting glaciers in the north to the scorching streets of Delhi, the world is crossing thresholds we once thought were decades away, and here in Nigeria, the story is hitting home hard. The heat isn't just a daily discomfort, it's a threat to our food. NIMET has warned that this year's temperatures are significantly above the long-term average. From Kano to Lagos, we are seeing heat waves that push our power grids and our bodies to the limit. Presenting a grim overview of the state of the climate, the World Meteorological Organization stresses that as glaciers continue to retreat and ice continues to melt, 90% of that extra heat is going straight into our oceans. And the result is that sea levels are 11 centimeters higher than they were just 30 years ago.
Between 2015 and 2025, we experienced the hottest 11 years on record. In 2025, our glaciers continued to retreat and ice continued to melt. The warming ocean and melting land-based ice are driving the long-term rise in global mean sea level rise.
Hot on the heels of a scorching decade, the United Nations Weather Agency has said that the Earth's climate is more out of balance than at any time in observed history.
In the current climate, there is an imbalance. We have the same amount of incoming energy, but there's less outgoing energy due to the increased concentrations of greenhouse gases. And that imbalance, with more energy coming in than going out, means that energy is accumulating in the Earth system.
Scientists warn that adaptation is no longer a choice. They say cutting emissions for climate neutrality restoring nature and biodiversity, and driving the clean transition as some strategies needed for our survival. And as we navigate this record-breaking 2026, they recommend staying hydrated and looking out for the vulnerable. Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
The Edo State government has taken its farmers' engagement drive to communities in Edo Central Senatorial District with a focus on profiling genuine farmers and boosting agricultural production through modern practices and cluster farming. The Edo State Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Security says the Back to Farm expedition targets improved farm yields as part of efforts to boost food security in the state.
The engagement begins in Uromi at the Eastern Northeast Local Government Secretariat. The team from the Ministry of Agriculture, led by the State's Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Security, Jerry Wangwe, addresses farmers on the purpose of the visit, reaffirming government's commitment to agricultural development. The Director of Agricultural Services, David Ogumbo, enlightens farmers on the new farming initiatives and the introduction of modern farming equipment aimed at improving productivity and efficiency.
Across the three senatorial district, there's what we call tractorization hub, a mechanization hub that is coming. So those implements that you are hearing is coming every now and then to your doorstep for you to access.
Farmers, including Thomas Okodua, are given the opportunity to express their challenges, calling for greater support and access to resources.
In the first case, God has blessed this environment with able-bodied boys and girls who are willing to farm, but they are handicapped. Why? Because they have no input to use, they have no finance to engage in, they have no facilities like equipments and accessories that follow those equipments.
For the state government, engaging farmers in cooperatives and cluster groups will address most of the challenges faced in the past.
The reason why they are here is to collect information from you, your challenges, get them across to us easily so I can know what to do and how to tackle them. Funds are available, but the government will not release funds to provide the real farmers. So I should not go into voicemail and other areas. So let's take advantage of it. There's money, there's input, there's fertilizer, there's equipment, there's storage facility, and there are buyers available to buy your products.
The team also visits a farm in Udomi, where the commissioner and his entourage assess farming activities, reinforcing the need for modern techniques and government support to improve output. At Uzia, the team makes a brief stop for an establishment visit, interacting with residents and observing activities in the community.
With this information we want to collect from us, so we go fit know the farmers, how many farmers they Uzia and waiting at the farm. So when the benefit they come, they go straight to the farmers.
As the tour continues to other locations in the Edo Central Senatorial District, the state government sustains its drive to strengthen agriculture as a major driver of economic growth.
The Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC, has announced that over 8.7 million learners across Nigeria have benefited from improved learning conditions and access to infrastructural materials under its 2025 to 2031 strategic blueprint. Speaking in Abuja at the 29th quarterly meeting of UBEC management with the Executive Chairman of State Universal Basic Education Boards, Sebebs, the Executive Secretary of the Commission, Aisha Garba, also disclosed that over 244,000 teachers have been trained in inclusive pedagogy and digital literacy, which marks a significant turning point in the Commission's reform efforts. She adds that sustained advocacy efforts helped unlock over 100 billion naira in previously unaccessed matching grants, with 30 states and the Federal Capital Territory now actively utilizing basic education funds. You're watching the news at 5 on Channels Television. Right after this break, we delve into the world of business and give you the latest reaction to the new appointment of the Minister of the Economy. Stay with us. Welcome back. Vice President Kashim Shettima has called for stronger communication strategies to drive Nigeria's food security agenda. He was speaking at the opening ceremony of the Nigeria Public Relations Week organized by the Nigeria Institute for Public Relations. Declaring the event open, the Vice President notes that public relations practitioners play a crucial role in shaping public perception, mobilizing stakeholders and fostering trust in government programs, especially in critical sectors like agriculture and food system. He also warns that misinformation and poor communication can undermine well-intentioned policies, calling for professionalism and ethical standards in disseminating information.
For the first time, the Kaduna State government is hosting the Nigeria Public Relations Week, a high-level profile event organized by the Nigerian Institute for Public Relations. The event, with the theme Food Security, from Policy Paper to Public Plate, the imperative of public relations, brings together Vice President Kashim Shettima, senior government officials, traditional leaders, communications experts, fellows of the Institute, amongst other invited guests.
This year, we are looking at the concept of food security from policy paper to public plate. This is part of the intervention of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations to get involved in affairs of governance and nation building.
The keynote address, delivered by a Pan-African Parliament ambassador on food security, focused on bridging the gap between agricultural policy and real-life impact through strategic communication.
Today, I speak on an issue that cuts across borders, sectors, and generation: food security, the critical role of public relations in moving us from policy commitments to real impact on the public plate.
Beyond policy conversations, the event also witnessed a significant recognition with the investiture of patron of the Institute on Governor Uba Sani of Kaduna State.
What qualifies him to bear this title, and he is very eager to have it. I hereby present the plaque.
We made at the point when the question of food security has moved beyond the realm of policy debate to become an urgent and shared national priority. Across our country, the challenge before us is both simple and profound. How do we translate well-crafted policies into tangible outcomes that reach the homes, the tables, and the everyday lives of our people?
Declaring the event open, the Vice President called for stronger communication strategies to drive Nigeria's food security agenda.
We live in an era when information is abundant, yet understanding is far from guaranteed. Policies, however brilliant in conception, do not happen on their own moment. They must be explained, trusted, and translated from technical language into human language. There must be strategies of the farmer in the field, the merchant in the market, and the family around the dining table. This is why we are patient, as exemplary national important.
The Nigerian Public Relations Week continues with panel sessions and discussions focused on how communication can bridge the gap between policy formulation and implementation. From Kaduna, Victoria Longjohn, Channels Television News.
Legal experts and rights advocates meeting in Yenagoa have raised fresh concerns over weak enforcement of human rights and environmental laws in Nigeria, warning that vulnerable communities continue to bear the brunt.
Yenagoa, the Bayelsa State capital, hosts the 2026 Nigeria Human Rights Conference, a gathering of lawyers, activists and traditional leaders focused on evaluating the country's human rights landscape.
Now we're going to be having the capacity.
Human rights and legal practitioners are calling for urgent reforms to strengthen access to justice and the enforcement of environmental laws, especially in rural communities.
The Human Rights Conference was conceived as a platform for lawyers, for practitioners within the human rights community, and of course for Nigerians who have interest on how we should have a just and fair system. We annually gather like this to see how best we contribute, review how we collectively commit to human rights promotion in the country. No development, no sustainable or enduring development can take place in the country, particularly our country that has multi-layered issues of environmental crisis, without environmental sustainability and environmental protection.
Protection of rural communities is central to this discussion, particularly the injustice they suffer as a result of environmental degradation.
Environmental rights are not abstract ideas. I wish they are, but they're not. They are indeed fundamental human rights. The right to clean air, right to safe water, and indeed a right to a healthy ecosystem are all inseparable from the rights to life, rights to dignity and livelihood.
Providing a community perspective, Chairman of the Bayelsa State Council of Traditional Rulers, His Royal Majesty Bubaraye Dakolo, describes the worsening environmental conditions affecting livelihoods in the region.
What the oil companies have been doing in the last 60, 70 years is to abuse the environment, abuse the people, and they get away with it. They get away with the highest declared profit in their business environments across the world. They get it from here. So if we have lawyers, why are they not suing them?
Lending his voice to the conversation, human rights lawyer Femi Falano says Nigeria has strong legal frameworks to protect the environment, but systemic governance failures make implementation a major challenge.
On paper, the architecture appears robust. The commitments are commendable. However, the lived reality tells a different story. They are too often under-implemented. Regulatory agencies are established, yet frequently under-resourced or constrained. Judicial remedies are available. Nigeria does not suffer from absence of environmental law. Rather, it suffers from an absence of enforcement, accountability, and political will.
The conference underscores the urgent need to bridge the gap between legislation and implementation, with stakeholders calling for stronger institutions, accountability, and inclusive access to justice.
And on business news, following a recent cabinet reshuffle by President Bola Tinubu, reactions are beginning to trail the appointment of Taiwo Oyedele as finance minister. Speaking on Business Morning earlier today, Johnson Chukwu noted that the new appointee faces a daunting task as Nigeria's debt profile continues to rise despite improvements in revenue. He adds that expectations are high for reforms that can balance fiscal sustainability with economic growth.
What we expect Taiwo to do is to reset the fiscal framework. I'm just not looking at just revenue. You have to look at how effectively is government deploying financial resources to create value in terms of social value, economic values, public goods. That, for me, is actually the biggest challenge we have. We don't just have a revenue problem. We have, to a large extent, a cost management problem. And if you look at the figures you read out, the national debt was about 144 trillion in December 2024. It had gone to 159.28 trillion in December 2025. That's over 15 trillion in additional national debt. Bear in mind that you said the total revenue was 28 trillion. So if you generated 28 trillion and you also borrowed 15 trillion, that becomes contradictory. Because if your revenue is growing, your debt profile should not grow. And that's a contradiction we are dealing with, and I hope that Taiwo, coming as the Sustaining Minister of Health, will resolve that. The government cannot continue to accumulate debt at a period when revenue is growing. You can see he did a good job in transforming the law governing the tax system in the country. And we expect him to achieve the same thing as the Minister of Finance. I think the market, like anywhere in the world, when you put the right person as the head of Ministry of Finance, the market reacts positively.
In Lagos, rental prices are rising faster than incomes, forcing many residents out of the island and into the mainland, where rents are now climbing under increased demand. Speaking early on Business Morning, Segun Phillips warns that the housing pressure is intensifying, urging the federal government to prioritize infrastructure and patient capital to address the growing crisis.
You find Nigerians in a quagmire where instead of paying long term for your house that you own over a 10-15 year, you see yourself paying incessantly for rent. However, infrastructure infrastructure for real estate environments is not moving as quickly and as fast as people going to places. Remember, Lagos carries 60% of real estate infrastructure in Nigeria itself. And over 3,000 to 5,000 Nigerians everywhere are coming to Lagos on a daily basis. So it calls for question, there needs to be housing. These people go to the places that they likely know that, yes, houses are cheap. Where are those places? Somewhere far off on the mainland, or somewhere far off in the extent of the island. When you talk about island, you look at three spheres: the VI, the Lekki Main, and the other areas further down. So those areas are places where you go to, but infrastructure is not moving as equally fast in that direction. As such, it calls for concern. That's why the Lagos-Calabar Expressway has been a circle to each and every one of us on that corridor. You find that Nigerians are living 2 to 4 hours traffic trench on a daily basis. It calls for question, what are we doing? So what we need to do as a country and as a people is to ensure we restructure the built industry in terms of funding. We cannot find infrastructure. We cannot have people living in houses without a proper financial mortgage structure.
And that's where we drop the anchor on this edition of the News at 5. I'm Dominic Iwiwu. For updates, kindly visit our website. That's www.channelstv.com. Up next is The World Today.